So what I wanted to tell you about today is really about, this is a very personal story for me, and it's about my journey and something that specifically has come up just recently. There's something unique in my astrology and in how I planned this life coming forward. I plan and lots of us bring karma in, right? We all have our karma that we bring in from and things that we're trying to work out in this lifetime. But I plan to actually relive those experiences in their entirety. I plan to have the similar circumstances, even the similar people in some cases, where I'm taking certain experiences. It was the really traumatic events of past lives and the traumatic events of this lives, the drownings, the betrayals, right, the burnings, all of those things. I'm actually physically reliving with the same circumstances and the same people and everything in this lifetime. And I didn't understand that. And even though I was told that by astrologers. Even Jim, our modern mudras palm reader, saw it in my palm that I have at the beginning of my lifeline. I have all these little lines joining my lifeline in the beginning, showing me, this side, he says, this side. But these little lines joining into my lifeline at the beginning, showing how I'm bringing forward all these past experiences. And I want to tell you about one of those. So this story actually begins about 500 years ago in Portugal. I first became aware of this about a year ago. I was at a one-on-one intensive channeling retreat where I was in and out of trance all day for 10 days, starting at 9 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. And about midway through that process, I became aware of and remembered this lifetime of myself. And I came into the lifetime, my memory began when I was about 40 years old. And I was living in Portugal. I was involved in map making and navigation. So I was working for the king. I specifically remember that I would be discussing different expeditions we would be taking with the king. And this was not war, this was all about exploration and going out and finding new areas, trying to bring back resources for us. And I was really, really in love with the process of like learning about the navigation and drawing the maps. And I even got involved a little bit in building ships, in designing ships. But really my first love was around the navigation. I had all the latest gadgets and tools, and I would plan all of these different expeditions. And I had a whole room full of apprentices that I was teaching these different skills. And there was one person in particular, as I was relating this lifetime and talking about it, I recognized that my focus kept being drawn to this one young man who sat in the front. I had tables set up with all of my different apprentices, and there was one young man that I focused on who I felt drawn to in a way that I couldn't explain. I told myself that it was because of his incredible ability with maps, right? Because he was so great with navigation, but it wasn't that. There was this soul connection that I experienced with him, and there was a part of me that I was in strong denial to, who was deeply in love with this young man. But I was a devout Catholic, and there was no part of me that thought that this was possible, right? That thought that this was okay. So I was telling myself that that's not true, that's not, it's just, and he was returning my feelings. When I looked at him and he would look at me as I was standing in front of him talking to him, I could see through his eyes. And I would say, oh, maybe he feels, a mentorship from me. Maybe it's because I'm his mentor. Maybe he sees me as a father figure. But there was always that part of me that was hoping that it was something different. And so I was very much in denial and repressing my feelings. And when I got this really amazing new piece of navigation equipment, it was this sort of brass round thing. I, of course, chose him to be the one to master it, knowing that it would throw us together a lot. And one evening, we were sitting together in my private rooms in front of a fire, looking at this thing and going over numbers and calculations, and he reached over and he put his hand on mine. And that moment was so powerful. I remember wanting to stay in that moment as long as I possibly could, because it was the moment of possibility, right? It was the only moment I would ever allow myself to be in relationship with this young man that I loved so irrepressibly. And after a few moments, I felt that urgency, that resistance well up in me so strongly that I bolted up out of my chair and I ran out of the room. And then I avoided him for the next several weeks. And then I was meeting with one of my captains who was leaving to go on one of our next expeditions, and he told me that this young man had joined his crew and was going to be going on the crew, and I knew that it was because I had always been talking about the fact that even though I designed all these expeditions, I never got to go on any of them, that I talked about all the time how great it was to be out on the sea and to be exploring and to be doing things, but my role now was to be planning and was to be the one in charge of all this, and I wasn't able to go, and he knew it was my wish. It was my wish to go, and so he went for me. And I told myself it was a good thing because it would get him out of my head and out of my mind, and that absence was a really positive thing for both of us because this could never happen. And about a month later, I heard that his ship had crashed and sunk, and he had drowned. And in that moment, the grief that welled up in me was unfathomable. And the loneliness and the awareness that I had been alone my whole life. I was single, I was childless, and I was going to remain that way for the remainder of my life. And I died with the wish on my heart that it had been me that died instead of him. And the feeling that it was my death, that he went because of me, that he went because it was my wish. And I knew in my soul review that this had been my twin flame. That this young man that I rejected. So flash forward into this lifetime, and I'm having this awareness a year ago. Well, I've done an awful lot of healing on myself, right? I've worked through lots of layers and layers and layers. And this whole system, this karmic system that I've been intending to work through in this lifetime, all came to a head just very recently. And at the end of it, I was laying on that amazing crystal bed back there that Ursula has. And she asked me, she said, what emotion are we going to be clearing? What emotion are you feeling? And I said, well, I feel overwhelmed because I'm planning this big event soon. And but as I was laying on the table, and she said, okay, focus on the overwhelm, it came up and I recognized that the overwhelm is the feeling of drowning. And as that sensation started to rise up out of my third chakra, I all of a sudden had the memory of myself. And memory of myself when I was maybe 10 years old, and I was in the ocean, and I was on a boogie board, and I got knocked off my feet. And I was being turned up and down, somersaulting underwater, and I was breathing in so much seawater, it filled up my lungs. I literally didn't know which way was up, and I was terrified. And I eventually got my feet underneath me, and I came up spitting up seawater. And as I'm feeling this, I feel the seawater pouring up out of my throat chakra, and this memory gets overlapped with the memory of this young man as he's fallen into the ocean, and he's struggling to keep his head above water, and his lungs are starting to fill with seawater. And I see it spilling up out of my throat chakra. I see seawater coming up all above me. And then I flash forward again to a second memory of myself as a toddler, when I fell into my neighbor's pool, and I sunk to the bottom because I didn't know how to swim. And I was down there for several minutes before the neighbor found me and dove in to save me. But that feeling, that memory of sinking was overlapped with the memory of this young man as he began to lose consciousness and began to sink below the surface. And then that memory brought me forward again to this lifetime. And in this lifetime, I went whitewater rafting. And the raft flipped over, and I was thrown into the space behind the rock, which is called a sinkhole. And when you're down at the bottom of a sinkhole, it's like being underwater at the bottom of a waterfall. And all of that water is pouring down on top of you, and I was pinned underwater. And the force of the water was so strong that it literally pulled my wetsuit boots off my feet. And I had so much adrenaline in my system, I thought, this is the moment, I'm dying, that I'm going to die right now. And when you have that much adrenaline in a near-death moment like that, that adrenaline, it does something to how you see. It actually expands how many frames per second that you see. It almost doubles it. So your perception of time slows down, that each moment becomes expanded. And it's like I had this incredible clarity as I'm down on the bottom of the river, thinking I'm dying. And I could see and feel everything, and I could think so clearly, and I was so calm, but there was nothing I could do. And then, amazingly, something shifted in the water, and it spit me back up to the surface. But that memory of that overlapped with the memory of the death moment. And it was in this moment that I lost the 8-week-old baby I was carrying. So what's amazing about that is that this was all pre-planned before I got here, that this was my karma that I needed to clear. I had wished this upon myself. And we have the mistaken understanding often that we think karma is something that's imposed on us, that there's a jury out there that's judging us. But it's not true, it's us. We are the jury, we are the judge. And I imposed this upon myself, right? I believed I was responsible. And so I wanted to take that death. So in this lifetime, I had to take that death. But my child came in and took that death for me. Now, what's amazing about that is that there's lots of different types of karma. And we have the kind of karma where we've taken on a judgment against ourselves, but we also have the karma of purpose. And it was my baby's purpose to heal me. So when my baby healed me, he also healed himself. So when this first happened, it was incredibly painful and it seemed senseless. But as my life unfolded and I could look back across all of these events, I began to understand that everything is purposeful. Everything is part of a bigger picture, but we don't always see the bigger picture, right? It's hard to see that bigger picture, that every bit of healing that you're going through is part of a bigger picture. And the big question is, as we're healing, what is it that we're healing to? What is it that we're trying to accomplish with our healing? Where are we going? And you can answer that by looking at it from an energetic perspective. What is it that we're trying to heal in ourselves? We're trying to balance our masculine and feminine energy. We're trying to come back into balance so that we can be more of who we fully are, which is divine creators, right? We are all divine creators. And we forget that, right? We come in with our karma, we come in with our wounding, with our fears, and we forget who we really are. We forget what it is. And what that means on a practical level is that we lose control of our ability to manifest. So we're always manifesting, right? We are always creating our reality. We are divine creators. We can't help ourselves. But what happens is that we're no longer in control of that process, that it's happening to us, right? And the person that's in control is our subconscious, is all of those events, all of those programmings, all of those belief systems that we have are in control. And this process of coming in and learning to balance this has been very much my story, right? That coming in and trying to understand how to come back into balance for myself. This has been something that I've only been able to accomplish just recently through a lot of work on myself and through drastic decisions in my life. And when you're out of balance, it comes up in a lot of different ways, right? It can show up as something as simple as when you're trying to create something and you feel unsupported. That's a place where you're out of balance. If you're trying to create something and you find that it's difficult to make choices, difficult to choose or decide or commit, it's an out of balance. How about if you're trying to create something and you get going strong and then you fade out at the end? You're out of balance. These are all of the ways in which our creative apparatus isn't working for us fully. What I came to understand is that part of my purpose, having been through this and understanding where I am now, is to now, part of my karma, is to teach others how to become more into balance, to teach about this process of balancing. So this has become my life purpose. I teach a program called Business Energetics. And the purpose of business energetics is to help you see where you are in this continuum and to help you grow into these other energies so that you can become more of who you fully are, which is a divine creator, to bring you back to yourself, to help you advance further without having to drag through some of the difficult karmic aspects of our existence. Make sense? So as you're thinking about your own life, I'm looking at my life now, and more as I'm progressing and experiencing stuff, I become more and more aware that every single thing on my life is on purpose. That when I came to create the curriculum for business energetics, I realized that everything I had learned up until that point was on purpose. Even the little things, even the time I was walking through the airport and randomly bought a book that I didn't know why I bought it, it was for this program. Everything was on purpose. Every job I entered, every person I met, it helped me, and it gave me the practical foundation and understanding to ground the channeled information that is the core of this program. It was all on purpose. So now, as I go through my life and things happen to me, I always have to say, okay, where is this going to fit? I don't see the big picture now, but at some point it will be revealed. At some point, it's like driving through the desert with your headlights on in the night, and you only see the next few steps, and you just have faith that this is taking you. And you know, it really would spoil kind of the fun if you knew it all in advance. You know, it's not nice in some ways to have it be unfolding one piece at a time, and then at the end, you get the big reveal. And that would be the thing that I would leave you with, is to think about with your own journey and your own understanding of your trauma and your healing and your path, is to know that it's all part of a bigger picture, and to understand that everything that happens is happening for a purpose. And when that purpose is revealed to you, when you get to the moment when you can look back and connect the dots and understand why these different people were in your life, or why they treated you in a specific way, or why these bad things happened, and it not only gives you a sense of understanding, and yes, there's still sadness there, right? There's still sadness about the bad things that happen in our lives, but if you understand why, and you see it from a spiritual perspective, then it feels beautiful, right? And your own life becomes something that inspires you. Make sense? All right. All right, well, thank you for listening to my story.